Hi guys, thanks for joining me again on my new little video experiment, reading short stories from my books. Lesson from the Edge. Today I'm going to be speaking about reincarnation because it was a huge, a really big step for me in acceptance or just understanding. And I got a lot of lessons in a very short time until I was really comfortable with in acceptance of reincarnation. And over the next few days, I'm going to be reading, 3 or 4 of the really lucid, really vivid ones. And this one today is called Hernick. During the dreams of previous lives, I have become accustomed to looking down at my feet, at what kind of shoes I'm wearing, or if I am barefooted. And in this way, my gender can also be revealed. This would not be the case of the following experience, though, because as I became lucid, I clearly saw my hands, and my focus was on my fingers. They were short and pudgy, and each one held a ring of bulky gold and stones right up to the knuckle. I was male, but my elegant costume would rival the closet of any woman. I was wearing layers of detailed woven textiles of rich, deep color, and they were edged in fine gold trimmings. I looked around and saw that I was sitting in a grand hall full of people in similar dress, and we were supping at huge tables full of rich food and drink. I realized that I was part of a king's court, and this type of gathering was my daily way of life. I was not a king, but only one of the numerous players in the court, and although my position had been long held, I knew I was not necessarily respected or valued. It seemed to be more of a fixture that held a meaningless title, and I was feeling very tired and bored with all of it. My amusement seemed to be in the amount of food and drink I could consume at each evening's gathering. Seated on a permanent spot next to me was my sister, who had my ear as she suffered me waves of gossip and endless comparisons of who and what was fair or equal to what we had. Her quest for power was unquenchable, and it had physically tainted her beauty. And so neither of us were married, and I would suffer her relentless pushing and poking me towards a more elevated status. She was to be both my closest ally and the bane of my existence. Our lifestyle in the court was good, but it was all due to her backstage bargaining for my advancements. I would be forever trapped in her debt and miserable for it. She would have nothing without the benefit of my gender, and her status would forever depend on me, the male heir to the family name. She would spend her life with the burden of being forever tied to a brother that really didn't want any of it, and yet was too lazy and too well cared for to leave for its comforts. She felt the entrapment as well, and so the constant nagging and prodding was a necessary evil in her mind as well. The last misdeed I performed at her bidding was evicting a widowed woman and her 2 children from one of the properties I held. Her husband had been murdered, and she had no other family or means of support and nowhere else to go. I let my sister's greed usurp my own generous heart, and I had the widow removed against her will and my own. I felt a terrible guilt at what I had done. It was slowly consuming me, and I tried to fill the hollowed emptiness by filling my plate. There was music and entertainment all around me, and the air was filled with joyful noise and laughter. But for me, it sang of a falseness, a performance called happiness that I could not participate in. And so I would sit with plate after plate of food and lick the grease from my thick fingers as I nodded to the droning sound of my sister's voice. It was time to go, and I was drunk enough to find some solace in sleep. But before I could get to my room, my sister pulled me aside. I was forced to listen as she formulated a new plan based on something she had just overheard while standing in the shadows. There was an excited energy in her words as she described the domino effect of dishonor that would land us squarely in the king's good graces. Another betrayal was in the making, and I was to spearhead it. The thought of it sickened me, though I listened without offering any verbal protest. I was finally able to break free by telling her we would refine the plan in the morning, and I found my way to the carved stone stairway that led to my chambers. I was finally away from the noise of the crowd and the sound of my sister's voice droning constantly in my ears until it reached deep into the confines of my brain. I moved myself slowly up the steps, carrying the weight of the world and the excess weight of myself. I took a wearied breath of the acceptance of what I had become and of what I had never wanted to be, where the room began to swim and I began to sweat profusely. I found myself gasping for air that would not come into me, and I began to clutch at my chest. I was losing my footing on these finely chiseled steps, and I felt the girth of my own body in its entirety crashing down on my lungs. I woke from this vivid experience knowing I had reached the end of this lifetime when I had been born into a name of privilege and status, and yet its reflections were my own misdeeds. I was called Hernick, though I do not know if that was my first or last name, and I knew that I had destroyed my own heart and will for the keeping of it. When I woke up from this experience, yeah, more than a dream, because I embodied this man. I felt him and smelled him and could taste and hear everything in the room. I was completely lucid, and I was completely within the embodiment of Hernick. Many of these dreams that came so closely in a row really, really solidified a soul searching that I was going through about reincarnation. And I'm going to be reading 3 or 4 of these really lucid stories within my book to kind of give you an idea of my journey into understanding reincarnation. And I hope you'll come with me. See you in a couple days. Bye bye.